Mystica. Real documented mysteries, officially recorded, still unresolved, never explained, still classified. A declassified government paper treats paranormal claims like a technical problem, not a campfire story. The record shows real budgets, real memos, and real signatures tied to unusual research. So, what were they trying to measure? Most people hear paranormal and think belief, fantasy, or hoaxes. But the files use colder words like evaluation, capability, and operational interest. And that changes the question. Tonight, we're staying evidence first, and we're staying inside the documents. If it isn't confirmed in declassified material or official reporting, we don't use it, and that's the rule. So what counts as documented here? FOIA releases, agency reading rooms, declassified program histories, and official statements. And that's where we begin. The first pattern is subtle but consistent across projects. Public summaries stay vague, while internal language gets specific. And that gap is the mystery. Because a vague public summary doesn't mean nothing happened. It means someone chose a safe framing, and the record shows that choice repeating. Start with the best-known example. Remote viewing research funded by U.S. intelligence-linked programs. CIA and other agency documents connected to the Stargate program were later declassified, and they describe tests, methods, and reviews. Those documents don't prove psychic powers as fact. They prove something else. Officials spent years trying to decide if there was signal worth using, and that's a big difference. The paper trail shows multiple program names over time. That matters because renaming is how sensitive work survives reorganizations, and it keeps the line moving forward. In memos and evaluations, you see cautious language. Phrases like reported ability, assessment, and operational utility appear, and the tone stays clinical. Here's the first contradiction the record creates. Some reviewers describe results as inconsistent, while others argue there's enough to justify continued testing. When a topic is hard to measure, inconclusive becomes a powerful outcome. It avoids the words success and failure, and it keeps the question alive. Now look at what the public usually hears. A short headline, a simplified claim, and almost no method detail, and that's not an accident. Because methods are the real sensitive asset in many government programs. Even when results are disputed, methods can reveal what an agency values and how it tests people. That brings us to the second category. Military interest in human performance at the edges. Officially, programs may be framed as research into perception, stress, or cognition, and the labels can hide the real aim. If you're expecting a file that says, "We found ghosts," you won't find that. What you find is a file asking, can humans obtain information without standard access? And that's the core. Then there's the third category the modern audience recognizes. UFO and UAP, publicly. UAP is often framed as an airspace and flight safety issue. But the record shows intelligence attention and data handling. Again, this doesn't prove an extraordinary explanation by itself. It proves a workflow. Collection, analysis, classification decisions, and controlled disclosure. And controlled disclosure is where the phrase in your caption fits. When explanations are deliberately limited, it usually means officials manage uncertainty and public reaction, and the files show that. Now, a critical rule. Don't merge unrelated claims. Remote viewing documents are not UAP documents, and paranormal becomes misleading when people mash everything together. So we separate by what the record actually supports, project by project, document by document, with dates and stated goals, and that's how we stay honest. Here's another thing the documents reveal without trying to. These projects often involve internal debate, not internal certainty, and you can see it in the wording. In some reviews, the tone is skeptical, even impatient. In others, the tone is cautious but open, And the disagreement is the story. That disagreement creates a tension that keeps funding decisions alive. If one office says no value and another says potential value, the next question becomes who wins? Now we get to the ethical concerns your caption mentions. When humans are test subjects, agencies must address consent, mental health effects, and the risk of misuse. And those concerns appear in official contexts. Even if a capability is doubtful, experimentation still has consequences. The record shows officials worrying about credibility, exploitation, and how claims can be weaponized. Because paranormal claims can be used as tools even when they're false. They can mislead, intimidate, recruit, or distract. And intelligence agencies track those possibilities. That brings us to a motive that appears again and again in cold policy logic. You study the unbelievable not because you believe it, but because your adversary might. If an adversary spends money on a claim, you have to evaluate that claim, not to join the belief, but to map the risk landscape, and that's a real institutional pattern. So the files don't need to say, we're afraid. They just need to say, evaluate, monitor, assess, and the fear is implied. Now look at the mechanics of secrecy in these cases. The program's existence might be acknowledged later, while the underlying data stays restricted, and that's why some data remains classified. Matters. A declassified summary can be a shell. It confirms the outline while protecting sources, methods, and potentially embarrassing internal arguments. This is where viewers usually jump to the wrong conclusion. They assume redaction equals proof of the supernatural. But the record doesn't support that leap. Redaction proves only one thing with certainty. Someone decided the information still has value or sensitivity, and the reason can be ordinary or extraordinary. Ordinary reasons are common. Names, locations, collection methods. Extraordinary reasons are possible, but you can't claim them without evidence. And we won't. So what can we responsibly say, based on documented releases? Government-linked bodies have funded and evaluated claims labeled unconventional, including remote viewing, and have managed UAP data under classification. And within those records, the tone is not mystical. It's administrative, method-focused, and full of caution language about limitations and reliability. That's the first big takeaway. The record shows seriousness, not certainty. Officials treated these topics as potential tools or threats, and that is already an important fact. Now let's talk about the unusual experiments line in your caption. In declassified remote viewing materials, you see structured sessions, scoring attempts, and repeated evaluation cycles. And that's what experiment means here. You also see something viewers rarely notice. The system keeps trying to turn subjective reports into measurable outputs, and that struggle is the heart of the file. Because if you can't measure it, you can't operationalize it. And if you can't operationalize it, you can't justify it. So the paperwork becomes a battlefield. That brings us to the internal conflicts that often stay hidden publicly. Some evaluators argue there's no consistent reliability, while others argue that rare hits justify continued work. If you're running a program on rare hits, you face a credibility trap. You can't promise success, but you also can't admit the whole thing is noise. So you write careful summaries. And those careful summaries become the public-facing story. Short, limited, deniable, and hard to turn into a scandal. And that's how institutions protect themselves. Now step back and ask the cleanest question the record allows. If the value was truly zero, why keep returning to it across years and different names? There are a few documented possibilities that don't require fantasy. Institutional momentum, fragmented oversight, and just-in-case logic can keep weak programs alive. But there's also the possibility the documents leave open. that some internal actors believed there was enough signal to keep digging, even if they couldn't prove it publicly. Here's the problem that keeps the mystery unresolved. You can declassify a conclusion, but you can keep the raw data locked away, and that prevents independent verification. This is why our framing stays disciplined. We're not saying it worked. We're saying it was pursued and partially documented. And that's the defensible claim. Now we connect that to the UAP side without mixing the evidence improperly. With UAP, the unknown often means unidentified in the data, not supernatural. And official statements repeatedly emphasize that. But the data pipeline still matters. Collection, sensor logs, pilot reports, intelligence review, and classification choices create gaps the public can't see into. Those gaps are where rumors grow, and rumors are loud, but the documents are quieter, and the quiet is what we're following. So when public explanations stay limited, the record gives us a practical reading. Officials may be protecting sources, methods, or ongoing assessments, and that's a standard intelligence pattern. Now back to ethics, because this is where the story turns dark without becoming melodramatic. If you test human claims under pressure, you risk coercion, self-deception, and psychological harm, and ethical warnings appear in serious research contexts. Even the act of studying paranormal claims can be weaponized socially. It can lend false legitimacy, or it can become a smear tool, and agencies understand that risk. That brings us to the most revealing part of many declassified files. Not the claims, but the management language about what should be said, what should be avoided, and what must stay internal. In other words, the record isn't only about research, it's about narrative control, and that's why these topics feel like secrets. Now we reach the key moment of your video. The rarely discussed official document isn't proof of the paranormal, it's proof of a decision to investigate the paranormal. And that decision forces one final question. Were they chasing reality, chasing fear, or chasing the fear of being outplayed? The documents don't give a clean answer. They give a trail of attempts, debates, renamings, and redactions, and that's why the mystery survives. So here's what we can conclude without stepping outside the record. Declassified files show sustained government interest in evaluating unconventional claims, while public explanations remained narrow and carefully worded. And here's what we cannot conclude responsibly. We cannot claim a confirmed supernatural mechanism when the documents themselves don't prove it, and we won't. But the mismatch still stands, and it's not small. Serious offices, serious funding, and serious classification choices existed, and the public received only the thinnest outline. So the next question is the one that keeps viewers locked in. If it was nothing, why is some of it still hidden? And who decides when the last page becomes public? Because until those remaining sections are released, the story is incomplete by design. And an incomplete record is exactly where real, documented mysteries live. Subscribe for real, documented secrets, not rumors, not noise. Next, we follow the timeline of one declassified program step by step, and we watch where the black ink begins.